You know, when you're in that limbo between Christmas and New Year's and you're coming up on a new year, you know, you probably have been eating a little bit heavier. I have been. It's like English toffee every day. And so sometimes you want something that's just a little bit more simple or can be more brunchy. Maybe you're still with your family and it's just something a little bit in the morning to noon would be nice, or something with a salad. For me, that's always quiche. I go right to a quiche because you can kind of make it your own. You can make it delicious. You can even use sometimes leftovers in it. But it starts with a dough, and I like to use something slightly different than my pie crust recipe. With pie crust in general, you know, you want the flakiest, wonderful, kind of just like perfect dough. But when it comes to something for a quiche, I like a little bit sturdier. I like to have a little bit more just like oomph to it, but I also want it to be easy to work with. And so for this one, I've made it slightly easier to work with. I'm putting my flour right into a food processor. You could do this by hand. I just like to do it all in a food processor. I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt. Put that right in there. And then I'm gonna add some butter and some cream cheese. So the butter obviously is usually what a pie crust is always gonna have. Gives it that flakiness, that flavor. The cream cheese gives it also obviously a little bit more fat, but it also makes it extremely sturdy and still makes it flaky. So I really like to work that cream cheese into it. So I'm gonna pulse it a few times just to get kind of like pea-sized or smaller pieces of the butter and cream cheese. So the best way to know is you have to look inside. So I like to just kind of check. You can kind of see now that we have kind of nice pieces. Some of them are just slightly bigger. Some of them are a little smaller. They kind of hold together but then flake apart. That's perfect because that means you're gonna have a nice flaky dough. So for the liquid, I have ice water right here. You don't want to get the ice cube in there because then you get pockets of water and you don't want that. So I'm just gonna put some in. Mix it. And then I have to check it. So here's the thing. The water is a little bit intuitive. Depending on the time of year, the humidity, the moisture, all that can make a difference on your dough and how much you need to add. Now look at that. That is holding together beautifully. And yet you can tell it still is slightly flaky. It's exactly what I want. So sometimes you have to adjust, you know, a tablespoon up, maybe not put it in quite a tablespoon. It can take a couple times to make, but I think the thing with dough is you can't be scared. You just have to do it. If one time it seems a little drier, oh well, you know, for the next time. I think most important, don't be scared and just try it. So I'm gonna start by taking this dough and finish it here on my counter. If there's any pieces in there, you know, there's always a few that get lodged underneath a blade. So you want to take it, push it together, see what we have here, kind of work with it slightly. We're not really kneading it, but we're more just making sure it comes to a cohesive mass, if that makes sense. And as we do that, we want to make sure to get all those pieces in there. I think the difference here is the cream cheese really makes it easier to work with. It's a more forgiving dough because it has that, you know, more fat in it, and it's just easier to roll out. If you do get a tear in it, you can kind of just push it together, which makes it just, to me, kind of a perfect dough for a quiche. Because you don't want quiche to be fussy. You don't want it to be too much work. You want it to be one of those things that you can just kind of do and not worry about. So we can see we have a disc. And for this one, I'm not even gonna chill it. I'm gonna pat it out kind of, and it would stick to the counter slightly. So we're gonna put some flour down. Make it pretty simple. I'm gonna get my rolling pin. You can use whatever one you like. I even try to get one and get flour on top. And we're just gonna roll it out to fit my pie pan. As I'm rolling out any dough, I try to go in circles and kind of go around to kind of keep the shape. But then I also always check and I'm moving it and I turn it just to make sure it's not sticking, because you know, that stuck dough is not something you really wanna work with. So I will always just check it, put my pie pan on it, make sure it's gonna be enough that I can kind of tuck it under, which that is. So you can see, this is a really easy crust to work with. I'm not really worried about it. I'm not worried about ripping it, because one, it's just sturdier, which I like, and it just makes it so you don't have to have those worries that you do with other things, and I like that. So sometimes I will go around and just slightly cut off some to make it somewhat easier. A scissors would make sense. You guys could totally do that. I had a knife out. So I'm one of those people that if it's out, if it's easy, if it's gonna get dirty anyway, I'm gonna use it. That's just how I am. I love, especially when my family is around, or when we're just getting together. I mean, okay, my mom's across the road, so we're kind of always together. But, you know, maybe this is something you want to have. You could have this crust in your freezer, just like a pie crust, you know, for like at least up to a month in an airtight container, just wrapped well. And then you could pull this out and make a quiche and it would be fresh. I think they're perfect during the winter because they give you that warmth, kind of that coziness, but then they're great with a salad. You know, in January here coming up, we're all gonna have what? Our resolutions. And they're all gonna be to lose weight, eat better. You know, we're coming off a pandemic. Whatever, just enjoy it. And that's what this is. This is kind of that good mix of cozy and of just something you wanna have. So now that I've rolled all that excess under, it's just like a pie. I'm gonna go around and crimp it. You can crimp it however you want. I don't usually go too fancy just because this is what I'm comfortable with. And I like to just make sure, so I'm going around, crimping, and see here. So this would usually probably worry you, but you can actually just press that together to make sure that's not a seam, and then go through and keep making your crimp. It's not one that I'm really worried about. So I am gonna pop this in the freezer just for about 20 minutes. That's gonna help it not shrink as much as when we pre-bake it, because you need to pre-bake it, because if you bake it all together with the filling, it won't bake evenly and you'll have a soggy bottom. Nobody wants that. So I'm gonna pop this in the freezer and we're gonna get started on the filling. For the filling, what I love about a quiche is you can really make it your own. And I always like to make sure, since the eggs are kind of, you know, lighter in flavor, I like to pick things that don't overpower or are too strong. So for me, instead of onion, I always like to go with a leek. It just has a nice light onion flavor without being too strong. So I'm gonna start by sauteing some leek. I have my skillet here slowly heating up. I'm gonna add a little bit of oil, and then I'm just gonna add all those leeks. Leeks are one that if you don't buy them cleaned and trimmed, you wanna make sure to open them up under water a little bit and rinse them out, because they always grow them in salt, not salt. They always grow them in sand, but I need to add salt to that. But they grow them usually in sandy soil. And so in that soil, it can sometimes get into the leek as it grows, and they can start getting in their little layers, some of that sand. And so you sometimes wanna rinse them out. So make sure if you don't buy trimmed and clean ones, you're gonna have to do that. So we're gonna let that slowly saute. We're gonna add a little bit of salt. Anytime you add salt in the beginning like this, it's gonna slowly draw out some of the excess water in something and help it kind of cook down a little bit quicker. While that's sauteing, we can now get out our crust that has been in the freezer. It's starting to get just that nice chill on it. And we're doing that again. We're just doing it so it doesn't shrink as much in the oven, because sometimes they can shrink. So I'm gonna take my piece of parchment. I crumple it just because it makes it so it goes in a little bit easier. It doesn't as hard to work with. I put it down there. Now I use pie weights. If you don't have pie weights, just use dry beans. Just as easy. I like to make sure to fill it mostly up to the crimp, because I don't want those edges to come in either. So if you just put a few in the bottom, you're still not gonna really be pressing against the sides. So I'm gonna pop this into my oven. We're gonna let that bake. Once these are sauteed and begin to soften, I'm gonna add my sweet potato so it can kind of start cooking and softening, and we're just gonna put it all together. After this bakes for a little bit with the pie weights, we just want to take the pie weights out. They've done their job. We're gonna remove them so it can finish baking. I always have a plate or something just set there that I can set them on. We're gonna set that back in, let it dry out the interior of the crust. The sweet potatoes are just about done. As you can see, I cut them small enough. They take a while to cook in the skillet, but if you cut them small, they make sure to cook more evenly and quicker. I'm gonna add some frozen spinach. It doesn't really need to cook, but I just wanna get some of that excess moisture off. I'm gonna let that sit there just a little bit. And while the spinach is going, I'm gonna add in a little bit of cream cheese. This is just gonna help that interior get really rich, and I want it to kind of soften, kind of melt into this. And this is just the best way to do that. So I just want it on there enough that the cream cheese, you can tell it's really starting to melt into it, and I can stir it around. That just makes so it's gonna mix into our custard egg mixture evenly, and you can kind of get it worked in there. Honestly, this smells delicious as it is. That, you know, cream cheese really is just gonna help what? It's gonna make it richer. It's gonna make it more delicious. So we're gonna mix that in, perfect. Now is just the custard filling. So obviously eggs. And you know, I kind of like to offset it with a few different things. So not just that cream cheese, but also then some milk, just a little bit of heavy cream. You know, you want to make it delicious, rich, but it gives it so much flavor too and really helps it just be a little bit special. So I'm gonna break up the yolks. I'm gonna stir that together just to make sure. I'm gonna add in some milk. I always use whole if I can, just because why? We're getting good flavor. You know, the whole milk actually has that delicious flavor in it. So once that's mixed in, I'm gonna add a little bit of cream. I'll measure it just to be safe here, but the cream, again, since we have some cream cheese in there, we don't need a lot, but it's just gonna add a nice richness, a good mouthfeel. It's really gonna make it something special. I'm gonna let this mixture cool down a little bit, but while it's cooling down, I'm gonna add just some chopped bacon to it. You can cook it however you want it, whatever type of bacon you like. I just like to have it cooked, ready to go. It's one of those that you can even have it in the fridge beforehand. But this is now kind of the base of our filling, and then we add it right into that custard mixture. So as you can see, it has all those components in it. I smell the bacon, I smell the cream cheese, the leeks, that spinach. And so now we just wanna mix this in. It sat there a little bit and gotten some of the heat off it. That's exactly what you want. Just kind of sit there. We're gonna stir it in just a little bit. And I'm gonna do it with my spoon instead, because you don't really wanna break up any of that goodness. So this is our filling. We need to let that crust completely cook first. Then we're gonna pour this in, we're gonna bake it, and we're gonna have a delicious quiche. This is gonna be one I think you're gonna like. My crust is done. So when you're pre-baking a crust, par-baking it, you wanna get it to a point where it's ready to eat. So you want it to be dry, you want it to start browning and get the golden color on it. That way you know it's cooked and you're not gonna get that soggy bottom on it. No one likes that. I'm gonna put the egg mixture right into there. So we have our delicious filling, that custard mixture. I always make sure too, if I can, sit there and kind of spread out the filling, because you don't want it to be in clumps and you don't want to have people not get everything, because it's delicious. And I make sure to have a nice full quiche. And depending on how your crust is, you may have a little bit left, and don't obviously overfill it, but it's not going to expand either as much. So it's not quite like a pie where it's going to run over. And you want all that deliciousness in there. Perfect. I turn the oven down just slightly from what I was pre-baking my crust at, because if you bake your eggs or an egg dish like this too hot, it makes the proteins in the eggs squeeze out, and then you get that extra kind of liquidy moisture on top. So I'm gonna pop it back into the oven. I'm gonna bake this, and then we are gonna have the delicious lunch. I took it out of the oven when there was just a slight jiggle in the middle, you know, just like a little wiggle jiggle. That's always a hard thing too to say, but you know what? You're gonna totally get it. It's not as complicated as it seems. When it's set around the edges and you get just a little bit of movement in the middle, that's perfect. Let it cool. If you cut it right away, it's still too soft. No, it finishes baking outside of the oven. There's so much residual heat in there that everything just finishes baking. And you know, now I'm not gonna tell you to necessarily try this, but you know how to know if it's a good crust? Look at this. It just moves in that pie pan. So we really baked that crust well, and that was the pre-baking and then baking again. I mean, it's perfect, and that's what I love. You don't have to do that. Don't pop it out if you don't, don't try it, because you don't want to break your crust. But of course I'm gonna cut it. I've cooled it. Oh, it's probably been 20 minutes. And the smell. You really get that bacon, which, bacon with anything is just perfect. I love that. You get that nice crispy crust. That first piece is always kind of hard. You want to make sure you really get those corners of it, get the edges cut. If not, I know you guys will be forgiving, because why? Because it's quiche and it's good. We're gonna try to take it out. Oh yeah, that is exactly, oh, that is beautiful. You get all the colors, you get, I wish you could smell this. You get the bacon, that's, I'm just gonna try it, because that's what I'm here for. I hate how all I do on here when I take a bite is just like, guys, it is that good. I would not make it if it was not good. And I would not tell you not to make it if it wasn't amazing. You get a flaky crust and it's well baked. So I don't get that soggy bottom, which I hate, because it just is like, no one wants that in their mouth. It's just like doughy. No, it's crispy crust. You get the soft, beautiful eggs that are just perfectly cooked, still soft, not all like coagulated and gross. You get the beautiful spinach, you get that bacon, you get the sweet potato. It's full of flavor, it's delicious, it's perfect for breakfast, lunch, side salad, dinner, whatever it is. It's one of my favorites. It's my go-to. I make quiche all the time and I love it. Try it, have fun, enjoy it. You will definitely be able to accomplish a crust, the filling. It is not a lot of work. It's exciting because it's delicious and you're making a great meal. So, as always, what helps the most? When you guys share these videos around, which you are so good at anyway, tag friends, write comments, because you know what? That just helps others see how easy this stuff is and how fun it can be to do. So share it around. Let me know what you think. Go to my website, wiseguy.com, for this recipe, other great recipes. I just want you guys to live on my website because that's where all the good stuff happens. So try it. Perfect thing for the upcoming new year.